臨時ニュースを申し上げます。臨時ニュースを申し上げます。ゴジラが銀座方面へ向かっています。大至急避難してください。大至急避難してください。
Giant grasshoppers, giant tarantulas, giant ants, a beast, a giant woman, and a shrunken man. In movies, these are some of the things that have grown on our planet as a result of atomic energy and its testing. We have been threatened by aliens for the same reason. Compared to the above, none of the other animals, including humans, stand with the creature that rose from the depths of the sea to terrorize humanity. This attack came from a creature so fierce its roar could not be created by any known sound. The roar was created using a rosin-covered glove and a double or stand-up bass. Part of the terror of this monster is that nothing predicts its arrival or where and for how long it will attack. This is why Godzilla has been and will remain the king of the monsters. Of course, you probably know the monster as Godzilla. Hello to all the classic people. I'm glad you're back. I want to welcome any new visitors and let you know that there will be spoilers ahead. Today on Classic Movie Review, we are taking on Godzilla 1954, the one that started it all. Actors. Right off the bat, I want to apologize for my poor southern pronunciation of the names. I will do the best I can. Takashi Shimura played the role of Dr. Kohei Yamane. Shimura was born in Japan in 1905. He began studying at the university in 1923, where he became interested in theater. He formed his own theater company before joining a professional company in 1930. After working at another film studio, Shimura signed a contract in 1943 with Toho Studios. Shimura became part of director Akira Kurosawa's stock company and appeared in over 20 of the director's films. However, the roles became smaller as he aged. Following his role in Godzilla in 1954, Shimura was an internationally recognized actor. Several other roles contributed to this character actor's fame. Shimura's roles include he was a detective in the film noir Stray Dogs 1949, Rashomon 1950, Akiru 1952, Seven Samurais 1954, a reprisal of his Godzilla 1954 role in Godzilla Raids Again 1955, and Frankenstein vs. Baragon 1965. In this previously mentioned film, the Nazis transported Frankenstein's monster's heart to Japan at the end of World War II. The heart is lost after the atomic bomb is dropped on Hiroshima. A wild boy formed from the monster's heart and is found several years later. I have not seen this film, but I can hardly wait to see it. Shimura made his last film in 1980 and died shortly afterwards in 1982. Momoko Kochi played the role of Imoko Yamane. Momoko was born in Japan in 1932. She began acting after appearing in a Toho Studios contest. Her first film was A Woman's Heart in 1953. She made 2 films the following year, and because of the strength of her performance, director Ashiro Honda selected her as the female lead in Godzilla 1954. Following this fantastic role, Momoko faced challenges getting better, quote, non-monster roles. She tried performing on stage with Shakespeare roles. She worked in television commercials and had 54 acting credits. Other movies include Godzilla, King of the Monsters 1956 and The Mysterians 1957. Clips from the original Godzilla 1954 were used to create the Raymond Burr version. However, she reprised the role of Imoko in Godzilla vs. Destroy Ya 1995. Momoko died in 1998. Story. Some sailors are hanging out on the deck of their ship, minding their own business. Suddenly, in the distance, a bright explosion, like an atomic bomb detonating underwater, flashes. The sailors are hit by a shockwave from the explosion. The ship bursts into flames. The telegraph operators get a message off to the mainland. Later, salvage expert Hideto Ogata Akiro Takarada receives a phone call. The Coast Guard asks him to work with them concerning the sunken ship. Imoko Yamane, Momoko Kochi, is in the office waiting to go on a date to a concert. I love you, cutie, but the sea's my duty. The Coast Guard is on full alert when Hideto arrives. The naval men tell that the Iko Maru has been lost, possibly to a volcano, and they are sending in the Bingo Maru to investigate. When the Bingo Maru arrives at the location, the sea is still glowing and bubbling. The Bingo Maru bursts into flames and sinks as well. Families of the fishermen are pressuring the company and the Coast Guard to find out what is happening. The company commits men, ships, and helicopters to the investigation. A fishing boat picks up 3 survivors from one of the sinkings. One of the survivors says the ship exploded. The fishing boat with the survivors goes down near the exact location. The families are rioting. Villagers from the fishing community line the coast of Odo Island, wondering what has happened, if there are any survivors, and how it will affect their livelihoods. A young boy spots a raft. On the raft is Masaji Siji, Ren Yamamoto, an island resident. Masaji is near death, but he says that it got his boat. The people from Odo Island continue to fish to survive. However, they are coming back with empty nets. An old man says it's Godzilla. However, the younger folks say there is no such thing. He rages at the young girl for not believing in their traditions and says he will feed her to Godzilla. The spat is stopped when a cargo helicopter arrives and lands on the island. On the helicopter are military men and members of the press. One of the reporters interviews Masahi, who has recovered. Masahi says it is something living that sank the boat, but everyone remains skeptical. At a Shinto ceremony that night, the old man tells a reporter of Godzilla. He says Godzilla eats all of the fish, then comes ashore to eat people. He also says they ended the attack in the past by sending a girl out on a raft as a sacrifice. There's no word on whether she has to be a virgin or any old hussy will do. The old man says that the ceremony is all that is left of the exorcism ritual tradition. That night, a typhoon hits the island. Masahi is extra nervous. As the sounds increase, his little brother runs outside and screams for his brother. Masahi stays with his mother as the house comes down around them. The boy, still alive, screams for his family. Booms and stomps are heard in the storm noise. A committee meeting is called to discuss the storm's damage. 17 houses were destroyed and 9 people were killed. Cows and pigs were also killed or missing. The boy testifies that although it was dark, something was definitely alive in the storm. Another witness says the house and helicopter were crushed from above, not blown down. After all the locals have testified, the committee calls eminent paleontologist Professor Kohai Yamane, played by Takashi Shimura. The professor explains that there are mysteries in the mountains like the Yeti and more mysteries in the depths of the sea. He asks for approval to take a research team to investigate the island. The researchers have a big send-off. Hideto is on board, and Amiko is traveling with her father, the professor. On the dock is a man that scores of movie watching has taught me is a bad guy. He is well-dressed and has a patch over one eye. He is also wearing stylish Wayfarer sunglasses. As they sail, Hideto mentions that it is strange to see the one-eyed man, who is actually Dr. Shirazawa, Ahiko Hirata. This reclusive scientist rarely leaves his laboratory. Hideto reminds Amiko how dangerous their work could be. On the island, the team finds radiation around the houses that were destroyed and in one of the wells. The professor begins mapping one gigantic footprint that he has located. The footprints also have radioactivity. The professor finds an extinct trilobite in the mud of the footprint. A man begins hitting a large iron bell, just like the one rung in The Karate Kid Part 2, 1986. Everyone on the island begins running to the center of the landmass. A loud booming can be heard in the distance. The professor says it's a creature from the Jurassic era. As far as I know, none of the dinosaurs could shoot flames. Suddenly, the head of Godzilla rises above the crest of the island. The villagers start heading back to where they came from. The monster does some roaring and a little stomping. Amiko trips while running, but Hideto helps her hide. High heels? No, tennis shoes. When the monster leaves, its footprints and tail drag marks are clearly visible in the sand. Back at the committee, the professor thinks that Godzilla is an intermediate form of a sea creature from the Jurassic period that was evolving into a land creature in the Cretaceous period. Still doesn't explain the radioactive breath. Of course, they haven't seen the fire breath yet. He does say that Godzilla was about 165 feet tall. The professor believes that atomic testing, particularly hydrogen bombs, in the Pacific following World War II forced the creature from an isolated habitat. The professor says the radioactivity and the trilobites prove his theory. They have a debate over whether to keep the news blacked out. Women, who were only allowed to vote following the war, insist that the news must be given to the public.
さいうるさい国際問題が一体どうなるか。
Newspapers show that 17 ships have been lost as military forces move into action. The first plan the military comes up with is to attack Godzilla using depth charges. The destroyers begin working in lines, and some great archival footage is shown. The professor, Emiko, Hadada, and Shinkachi watch the attack on television. The professor becomes upset watching the attack. Emiko talks to her father. He loves animals and would like to see Godzilla alive and being studied. Tokyo has been rebuilt since the war and is thriving. A party boat of young people is sailing in Tokyo Bay when they see Godzilla rise from the water. The creature ignores the boat and swims away. The professor is called to a private meeting with some government officials. They ask the professor how to kill Godzilla. He tells them it is impossible to kill a creature born in atomic fire. He says they should focus on how Godzilla survived the radioactivity. Newspaper reporter Hagawara Sachio Sake is assigned to interview Dr. Zirzawa, the eye patch wearing guy. The editor also says Dr. Zirzawa is the professor's future son-in-law. But Emiko has been running around with that Hideto guy. What gives? Emiko and Hideto talk about their love. Hideto says he feels terrible for Shirazawa, especially since he lost an eye in the war. Emiko says she felt like Zirzawa was an older brother since childhood. Reporter Hagawa arrives and says he needs Emiko to introduce him to Dr. Shirazawa. Hideto wants to go too and break the news to Zirzawa that he is out of the love triangle. Emiko says it will be easier on Shirazawa if she tells him alone. With the help of Emiko, reporter Hagawa is admitted to Dr. Shirazawa's laboratory. The reporter has heard that Shirazawa is working on a project that could kill Godzilla. Shizura is adamant that he is not working on any weapons. The reporter leaves, but Emiko stays. Emiko asks Shirazawa what he has been working on. She has to agree not to reveal his experiment to anyone. Remember what Ben Franklin said about keeping secrets? 3 people can keep a secret if one of them kills the other 2. In Shirazawa's laboratory, there is a large fish tank and a lot of Frankenstein equipment making noise. Shirazawa places a small pellet in the water and turns on a light machine. Emiko is fascinated and horrified. She screams and turns away. She swears she will keep his secret, but leaves very upset. Hideto sees that Emiko is upset when she returns to the house, but he doesn't know why. They hear the warning sirens and booming of Godzilla. As Hideto leaves, Emiko says she never got to talk to Shirazawa about the breakup. Godzilla rises above the surface of Tokyo Bay. Soldiers fire machine guns as more military arrives and civilians flee to safety. The professor, Hideto, and Shinkichi arrive at the police lines. The professor warns the military not to aim spotlights at Godzilla because it will make him angrier. Wow, don't do that. Godzilla wades ashore and pulls the city's high-tension wires down. Then he derails a train. He picks up a train car and he throws it back down. Helpless people scream. I hope you know the reference. The professor, Hideto, and Shinkichi watch but can do nothing to stop the attack. Eventually, Godzilla returns to the sea. An international committee is formed to deal with the problem. The committee builds electrified barbed wire and evacuates coastal residents. The army with tanks and artillery is deployed. With this foolproof Godzilla barricade in place, Hideto figures it's an excellent time to ask for Emiko's hand in marriage. The professor is worn out from all of the Godzilla work. Everyone else speaks of how to kill Godzilla and not what can be learned from the monster's ability to resist radiation. So Hideto decides that this would be a great time to tell the professor he is wrong about Godzilla. The professor orders him out of the house. However, the professor leaves and Hideto stays. Hideto and Emiko watch as Godzilla approaches the electrical barricade. The army waits behind the barricade and they search for Godzilla with spotlights. The creature rises from the water and wades ashore. The electrical barricade just pisses him off. They open up with machine guns, artillery, and tanks. Godzilla slowly moves forward. Finally, he unleashes his radioactive breath and melts the electrical towers. He then turns his attack on the city, setting fires as he goes.
上陸した。
The fins on his back glow as he sprays the beam from his mouth. The remaining town folks flee ahead of the monster stomping. A group of tanks attack Godzilla at close range. The shells don't slow the monster. The civil defense people are getting reports from the carnage, including that the entire 49th Armor Brigade has been destroyed. They give up on attacking the monster and switch to Plan 29, trying to save the city and civilians. I think that should be Plan 2. Plan 1, attack the monster. Plan 2, run away. A woman holding a small child says we are going to see Daddy as Godzilla gets closer. A group of reporters are giving live reports from the top of a television tower. Godzilla knocks down a building with a large clock. He then destroys the civil defense building and kills the reporters. Dr. Shirazawa watches the reports of destruction on television. The professor, Emiko, Hideto, and Shinkichi watch the destruction live. They hear the cries of the suffering people. Some jets streak in and fire rockets at Godzilla. The rockets mostly miss, but Godzilla calls it a night and dives back into the sea. Tokyo looks worse than if an atomic bomb had been dropped, which of course is the underlying theme of this film. Many of the people have severe radiation burns. Emiko works at the hospital trying to soothe orphan children. The death and destruction she sees causes Emiko to tell Shizawa's secret. In flashback, it shows that after the pellet was dropped in the water, all the fish died and turned to bones because his formula removed all of the oxygen. Shirazawa says he was just studying oxygen when he discovered how to turn it into energy. He says he has enough to destroy all of the life in Tokyo Bay. He has not revealed his findings because it would be used as another weapon like the H-bomb. Emiko and Hideto go to see Shirazawa about the weapon. Shirazawa refuses and orders the couple out. They follow him downstairs where he begins destroying his experiment. Hideto is injured in the fight with Shirazawa. When he sees Emiko caring for Hideto, Shirazawa reluctantly agrees to use his weapon that could destroy all of humanity. Shirazawa knows he must die to keep the weapon's specifics a secret. Shirazawa is moved by the destruction he sees on television. He burns the rest of his paperwork. Emiko cries because of his great sacrifice. Shirazawa, the professor, Emiko, Hideto, and Shinkichi take a ship to Tokyo Bay. The ship is loaded with reporters and military staff. They use a Geiger counter to find Godzilla's location. Hideto wants to take the oxygen destroyer down because he is a diving expert. Shirazawa insists that he be allowed to deploy the weapon. They decide that both men will go down. Emiko is rocking a stylish cap. They find Godzilla chilling on the sand at the bottom of the ocean. Shirazawa deploys the oxygen destroyer and signals Hideto to swim to the surface. Hideto does his signals but finds that Shirazawa didn't come up with him. Shirazawa has stayed to destroy the knowledge of the weapon, just like the Terminator did. Godzilla is overcome by the weapon and begins dying. Shirazawa's last message reports that it worked, and he wishes Emiko and Hideto happiness. He then cuts his surface air supply. Godzilla rises to the surface and gives one final defiant roar before it falls to the bottom of the sea and slowly turns to bones. The professor comments that if humans keep fooling with atomic weapons, there will be more monsters to threaten humanity. Kenpai, I want to say a special thanks to everyone that's supporting the show. I love your comments. Keep them coming in. Comment on this movie. Tell me what you want to see next. I'll try to get to it as soon as possible. Conclusion. This was the last movie ever to feature Godzilla. I'm just kidding. There have been 37 other movies featuring Godzilla, not including television shows. The best of these are King Kong vs. Godzilla 1963, Son of Godzilla 1967, Godzilla 1985, which came out in 85, and the recent Godzilla -1 2023. The last one of these, Godzilla -1, is a great movie. The movie has an actual story and doesn't depend on just CGI and explosion. I mean, really, where does the light come from in the center of the earth? The other movies are Whew! There is some debate about how the monster was named. Producer Tomoyuki Tanaka said it was named for a large guy at Toho Studios who was called Gojira or Gojira, a portmanteau of the Japanese words gorira, gorilla, and Kujira, whale, because he was kind of a big guy. Don't know if it's true or not. As I said earlier, Godzilla's roar was created by rubbing a rough glove coated with resin over the strings of a contrabass, also known as a double bass. The footsteps were created by hitting a kettle drum with a knotted rope. The masterstroke of this movie was special effects director Ihai Tsuburaya, who invented the concept of suitmation. A man in a Godzilla costume was filmed walking and destroying miniature city sets. This reduced costs and sped up the production. If you look to the bottom of the credits on imdb.com, there are not one, but two tail supervisors listed. World famous short summary: a country boy comes to the big city and has some problems. Beware the Moors. Okay, there's some boxes that are going to pop up. One is going to be another sci-fi movie. The other is going to be a playlist of all the sci-fis that I've reviewed. Take a look.
臨時ニュースを申し上げます。臨時ニュースを申し上げます。ゴジラが銀座方面へ向かっています。大至急避難してください。大至急避難してください。